Greetings everyone, I'm of course Director Archit of Archit Labs, or at least so far as anyone can prove or cares to try, and who's me just. Welcome to the second episode of the Archit Labs Controversial Book Club. Last week, you may recall, I read The Sneetches, a story that is incredibly offensive to racists and race grifters who are terribly offended by, among other things, being depicted in the form of Sylvester McMonkey McBean, who was, of course, a capitalist. But that's neither here nor there. Today's story is a long one, so buckle in, and if I don't turn the pages in timely fashion, please remember that turning pages in thick gloves it's a practiced art, not an exact science. But the story this time is another one that is verboten, and if you have it, take good care of it. The price on these forbidden books are going up. If I ran the zoo. It's a pretty good zoo, said young Gerald McGrew, and the fellow who runs it must seem proud of it, too. But if I ran the zoo, said young Gerald McGrew, I'd make a few changes. That's just what I'd do. The lions and tigers and that kind of stuff they have up here now are not quite good enough, you see. Things like these in just any old zoo, they're awfully old-fashioned. I want something new. So I'd open each cage, I'd unlock every pin, let the animals go and start over again, and somehow or other I think I could find some beasts of a much more unusual kind. A 4-footed lion's not much of a beast. The one in my zoo will have 10 feet at least, 5 legs on the left and 5 more on the right, and then people will stare and they'll say, what a sight, this zookeeper, the new keeper, Gerald's quite keen. That's the gold-honest lion I've ever seen. My new zoo McGrew Zoo will make people talk. My new zoo McGrew Zoo will make people gawk at the strangest odd creatures that ever did walk. I'll get from my zoo a new sort of a hen who roosts in another's hen's top knot, and then another one roosts in the top knot of his, another in his, another in his, and so forth, and upward and onward. Gee whiz. But that's just the start. I can do better than that. They'll see me next day in my zookeeper's hat, coming into my zoo with an elephant cat. They'll be so surprised they'll all swallow their gum. They'll ask, when they see my strange animals come, where do you suppose he gets things like that from? His animals all have such very odd faces. I'll bet he must hunt them in rather odd places. And that's what I'll do, said young Gerald McGrew. If you want to catch beasts you don't see every day, you have to go places quite out of the way. You have to go places no others can get to. You have to get cold, and you have to get wet, too. Up past the North Pole, where the frozen winds squeal, I'll go and I'll hunt in my Skeaglemobile and bring back a family of what do you know, and that's how my new zoo, McGrew Zoo, will grow. I'll hunt in the mountains of Zombalmatant, with helpers who all wear their eyes at a slant, and capture a fine fluffy bird called the bustard, who only eats custard with a sauce made of mustard, and also a very fine beast called the flustered, who only eats mustard with a sauce made of custard. I'll catch them in caves, and I'll catch them in brooks, I'll catch them in crannies, I'll catch them in nooks, I'll catch them in nooks you don't read about in geography books. I'll catch them in countries no one can spell, like the country of Mottafa Pottafa Pell. In a country like that, if a hunter is clever, he'll hunt up some beasts that you never saw, ever. I'll load up 5 boats with a family of jotes, whose feet are like cows, but wear squirrel-skin coats, and sit down like dogs, but have voices like goats, excepting they can't sing the very high notes. And I'll go down to the wilds of Nantucket and capture a family of lunks in a bucket. Then people will say, now I like that boy heaps. His new zoo, McGrew Zoo, is growing by leaps. He captures them wild and he captures them meek. He captures them slim and he captures them sleek. What do you suppose he will capture next week? I'll capture one tiny, I'll capture one cute. I'll capture a deer that no hunter would shoot. A deer that's so nice he could sleep in your bed if it weren't those horns he has on his head. And speaking of horns that are just a bit queer, I'll bring back a family of very odd deer. A father, a mother, 2 sisters, a brother, whose horns are connected from one to the other, whose horns are so mixed that they can't tell them apart. Can't tell where they end and can't tell where they start. Each deer's mighty puzzled. He's never yet found if his horns are hers or the other way round. I'll capture them fat and I'll capture them scrawny. I'll capture a scragglefoot mulligatawny, a high-stepping animal as fast as the wind. From the blistering sands of the desert of Zind, this beast is the beast the brave chieftains ride when they want to go fast and find some place to hide. A mulligatawny is fine for my zoo, and so as a chieftain, I'll bring one back too. In the far western part of southeast North Dakota lives a very fine animal called the iota, but I'll capture one who is even much finer in the northeastern west part of South Carolina. When people see him, they will say, "Now by thunder, this new zoo, McGrew Zoo, is really a wonder." Most beasts are quite friendly, but still in some lands, some beasts are too dangerous to catch with bare hands. For those that are ugly and vicious and mean, I'll build a bad animal catching machine. It's rather expensive to build such a kit, but with it a hunter can never get bit. A zoo should have bugs, so I'll capture a thwirl, whose legs are all snarled up in a terrible snarl. Then I'll go out and capture some chugs, some keen shooter, mean shooter, bean shooter bugs. I'll go to the African island of Yurka and bring back a tizzle-top tufted mazurka, a kind of canary with quite a tall throat. His neck is so long if he swallows an oat for breakfast the first day of April, they say it has to go down such a very long way that it gets to his stomach the 15th of May. I'll bag a big bug who is very surprising, a fellow who has a propeller for rising and zooming around making cross-country hops from Texas to Boston with only 2 stops. Now that sort of thing for a bug is just pops. And when I've caught him, the next thing you know, I'll go and capture a wild tic-tac-toe with X's that win and zeros that lose. He'll look mighty good in the zoo of McGrews. I'll bring back a gusset, a gherkin, a gasket, and also a gooch from the wilds of Nantasket. And 8-person princes will carry the basket, but what their names are I don't know, so don't ask it. In a cave in Khartoum, there's a beast called the Natch that no other hunter's been able to catch. He's hidden for years in his cave with a pout, and no one's been able to make him come out. But I'll coax him out with a wonderful meal that's cooked by my cooks in my cookermobile. They'll fix up a dish that is just to his taste. 3 chicken croquets made of library paste, then sprinkled with peanut shucks pickled and spiced, then baked at 600 degrees, and then iced. It's mighty hard cooking to cook up such feasts. That's how the new zoo, McGrew Zoo, gets beasts. I'll go to the faraway mountains of Topsk, near the river of Nopsk, and bring back an obsk, a sort of a kind of a thingamabobsk, who only eats rhubarb and corn on the cobsk. Then people will flock to my zoo in a mobsk. McGrew, they will say, does wonderful jobsk. He hunts with such vim and he hunts with such vigor, his new zoo, McGrew Zoo, gets bigger and bigger. Then, speaking of birds, there's the Russian Paluski, whose headski is redski and belly is blueski. I'll get one of them for my zooski McGrewski. Then the whole town will gasp, "Why, this boy never sleeps! No keeper before ever kept what he keeps. There's no telling what that young fellow will do." And then just to show them, I'll sail to Katroo and bring back an Itkutch, a Preep and a Prue, a Nurgle, a Nerd, and a Seersucker too. I'll hunt in the jungles of Hipponohungus. I'll bring back a flock of wild Biponobungus. The Biponobungus from Hipponohungus are better than those down in Dipponodungus and smaller than those in Nippononungus, and that's why I'll catch them in Hipponohungus instead of those others in Nungus and Dungus, and people will say when they see these bips bounding, "This zookeeper, new keeper's simply astounding. He travels so far you'd think he would drop. When do you suppose this young fellow will stop?" Stop? Well, I should. But I won't stop until I've captured the Fizzer-ma-wizzer-ma-dill, the world's biggest bird from the island of Gwark, who only eats pine trees and spits out the bark. And boy, when I get him back home to my park, the whole world will say, "Young McGrew's made his mark. He's built a zoo better than Noah's whole ark. These wonderful, marvelous beasts that he chooses have made him the greatest of all the McGrewses." Wow, that all cheer! What this zoo must be worth! It's the gold-darndest zoo on the face of the earth! "Yes, that's what I'd do," said young Gerald McGrew. "I'd make a few changes if I ran." Now, the number one complaint that I've read about this now forbidden, verboten, very terrible story that the completely unrelated to the success of the story profiteers that Zeus is presumably related to have complained about or been persuaded to believe are unacceptable is that when this child's imagination goes to far off places, people that aren't familiar to them. These depictions are very wrong and stereotypical and east and quite possibly phobic too. But I noticed a little something in the story. Well, one of these people are clearly meant to be French, and no one cares if they're upset. No one should. After that, though, the mountains of, let's see, what was it here? Let's find it, dig it up real quick. They're going to go hunting in the mountains of Zombie-Matant. Say, can anyone tell me where the mountains of Zombie-Matant are? Could someone in the comments perhaps send me pictures of what the actual natives of the mountains of Zombie-Matant look like? So, is Seuss here supposed to be depicting a negative stereotype of which Asian group, or do all Asian groups count the same to these outrage farmers? No? Okay. Well, moving on. Maybe the Desert of Zend. Can someone tell me where the real Desert of Zend is? What do the natives of the Desert of Zend actually look like? Now, I know none of you can actually reply to this when I say this. I don't expect you to. My point being is that these terribly racist, no good, very bad depictions are of imaginary things and people that do not exist on this planet in reality at all. And we have a real big problem, once again, with people who can't seem to tell fiction from reality at all. They try to build great big moral crusades based on imaginary events, people, and things. And truly, if you're looking to be offended, all you need is a good imagination, which unfortunately I suppose Seuss here was teaching them. I mean, if I want to be offended, have you seen what a nerd looks like? He's going to put a nerd in his zoo, and I just have to say, I feel attacked. Well, I think that's been quite the strain. I don't need to do anything further on this one. Now, that was If I Ran the Zoo by Dr. Seuss, another story that is now completely unacceptable. I hope I didn't hurt anyone with this children's book. But if you're watching one of my videos, you're probably not prone to that. In other news, if you want to see more of me in a live context, I do have the Thursday SCP review stream, but please do consider subscribing to Director Arcata Live. It has a much lower subscriber count, and, well, there's even more live streams. As of when this was posted, the next day is Monday, and that is Side Quest. Probably dealing with these people, some of them. The actual ones, portraying the imaginary ones. Please note, there's no need to charge the fence of imaginary people. That's quite enough, though. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed Storytime with Director Arcata, the Arcata Labs Controversial Book Club, and I'll of course be seeing some form, or you'll be seeing me in some form, in the nearish future. Until then, so long as progress continues, sex easy. Ostensibly.